Elevated Grapes Podcast.
Elevated Grapes Podcast.
With your host, Sethi.
Your host, Sethi.
And Stylist Rashi Bindra.
It's time to get started.
Let's talk fashion, shall we?
So welcome to Elevated Grapes. I am your host, Sethi.
And I'm your co-host and Stylist Rashi Bindra.
So today we have Chrissy from Vocab Communications. And Chrissy, just to do you justice, I made a couple of notes. I'm going to read a little bit about you and then let you say your piece too. We just want to make sure we give you the introduction you deserve.
Thanks.
So Chrissy is with Vocab Communications. It's a boutique PR firm focused on helping your personal brand stand out from the rest, with clients including Columbia, Fitness Depot, Flight Center, artists like Cascade, Sean Kingston, Nelly, Nicki Minaj, Four Corners, Akon, and Tiesto. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's a really incredible list of clientele and work that you do. So thank you, Chrissy, for being with us on Elevated Grapes and giving us your time.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So Chrissy, tell us a little bit about you and Vocab Communications.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a PR practitioner. I've owned Vocab for 11 years. So some of the clients that you've listed, we've worked with from over the years, from doing music tours, all the way from like doing PR campaigns for sports brands. We've worked with Microsoft, Rexall. We've worked with tons of different lifestyle and music clients. So we've done a variation of different brands in music. And I'm really thankful that, and even during this time in COVID, I'm still working. So we've been doing that for a long time now.
So in terms of the clientele, it's quite a wide variety. I mean, there's corporate in there, there's lifestyle in there, there's music artists in there. So is there sort of like a direction that the company has, or how does it work in terms of picking the type of clientele you work with?
Yeah, for sure. Like a lot of PR companies don't always do what we do, because we do like a mix of film and television and music, and then we also have this consumer brand side. So what I kind of noticed throughout the years and when I've been working in PR, all those worlds collide a lot. And so we do a lot of lifestyle PR, which could be in fashion, it could be beauty, it could be consumer brands, it could be yoga, it could be fitness brands, it could be anything. But we see a lot of the time that celebrities do work in those worlds too, and they're also launching their own brands. So we kind of do a mix of them. And then over the time, I've learned both sides of those worlds. I started in music first, and then a little bit later, I moved into the consumer brand side of everything.
So is it fair to say that music is sort of one of your passions, and that's
it is, yeah. Yeah, entertainment. I love it. Like film and television are one of my favorites as well too, along with music. Music's always just come to me naturally. So it's been really lovely to see, like, as the brand's been growing, that I've been able to keep music and sustain it and do more, and then start doing music, working with music clients all over the world. We just started breaking out into the US about 2 years ago, working in the music world now, but we're really known nationally across Canada as a PR agency. But I've been lucky enough that now we're doing some great work in the States, and we've done some in England as well too. So in the UK, so we're expanding. My little shop is growing. Yeah.
It's nice to see
amazing.
That. Yeah. It's nice to see that too, and I sort of feel, just because I work with you in a different capacity on a separate radio show. You also work, which is this is what I found really nice about your firm, is you also work with a lot of budding artists and artists are sort of on the come up. So talk to us a little bit about that side of your business.
Yeah, so when you're working with development artists, it's very different than working with celebrities. So developing artists, you're trying to get, not trying to get people to interview them. You're trying to find that story, and you're telling media about it so that you're creating this hype, or really getting me to understand why this artist is important and why their sound's different and what their story is. So that takes time. It's cultivating relationships. It's finding different outlets that match the artist. And it's also finding the stories that match with the artist as well too. So when you're doing music PR, it's not just always about the music. Sometimes it's about the person too. So if an artist likes, let's say, like yoga, or they do like fitness, or they do have other things, there's other hobbies outside of just being a musician or being any form of a music artist, recording artist. So we look at those, we kind of like dissect the client to know what their loves are. And then from there, we start to find those media outlets that really gear towards that. So yeah, it's part of it. And then when you're growing and you're working with celebrities, and then hopefully over time your artist grows, they win awards, if it's Junos or it's MMVAs, whatever it might be, you're hoping that you're growing with them and you're kind of growing together as a team. So it's very different working with celebrity than it is with a budding artist. So, but it's fun in both ways, challenging, but fun. Yeah.
Um, an interesting point you made there was sort of diving into their personal side of them, not just the artist side of them.
Yeah.
How do you find that helps in terms of building the brand for whether it's sometimes it's also you're working with a corporation that may have a couple of visible executives that you may want to highlight as well too. How does it work in terms of building that brand and helping the target audience resonate with the artist on a level outside of music?
So in consumer brands, you mean by, like, if I'm working with the CEO and I'm trying to develop them, is that what you mean by?
Well, I mean, almost both,
Yeah.
because I mean, they're two different sides, but I'm assuming
They
there's
are,
some
yeah.
parallels.
Yeah, there are. So music is different than, I would say, working with a CEO,
Of course.
Right, they are. And there's very different strategy that goes around working with brands and artists. They do collide when, you have a brand that has an artist representing the brand, right? That happens a lot. We see that all the time. But on different sides, when I'm working with the CEO, it really depends on what we're doing. So sometimes I'm working with, BNN Bloomberg, for example, and I'm pitching a story that's an industry-based story because that audience particular to BNN Bloomberg are looking at stocks and investing, and they want business news. They're not going there for artist news. They're not going for the much music news. So it's very different the way that you work with them, along with then creating key messaging. When you're working with the CEO, there's a lot of things like, oh, sorry, I got my dog here too. This is Beer.
You're more than welcome.
I'll show him in a minute.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you're working with a CEO, it's very different in the fact that you're doing a lot of key messaging, because when you're doing business news, they kind of want to get the scoop. So they can ask questions that are really, really difficult. And sometimes the company might not really want to allude to certain things, right? Or they're not prepared yet to talk on certain topics, let's say, or something's happened in the media. So you're really working with key messaging, you're working with media coaching, and then you're along with them, giving an announcement or training them to be a spokesperson. So it's very different than working with musicians. As a musician grows, though, there are similarities that you can use, like bridging and cherry picking, which are techniques within that you teach in media coaching. So, for example, if like a scandal breaks out, and Justin Bieber does something crazy, my job would be to come in and work with him and be able to explain key messaging and then kind of coach him and coach his way through the situation. But that doesn't happen all the time, though. That happens with really large celebrities. And sometimes those are PR stunts too, to be honest. There's a mix of both. Sometimes they're doing it because they want the press. They create the scandals themselves. So very different ways of working in the system, but they're both challenging and fun at the same time.
So I think that's a myth right there that you sort of hit on, that some of these things are made for press. So like,
I'll give you an example. Oh gosh, yeah. I'll give you an example of one. So when Drake and J-Lo apparently put I think they put a selfie or they took a picture of each other. Right. I guess
we all remember that. Yeah, we all remember that.
That was 100% for the new song they had coming out, because everyone's like, J-Lo and Drake are dating. Like, this is amazing. And that's not true. So they did it. They did it so that they knew that they were coming out with a project, and they did it because they knew people would talk, right? You have J-Lo, who's beautiful and a massive celebrity, and you have Drake, the same thing. They also have an age difference. There's all these stories that people could have, and for that, it makes good news. It makes good entertainment news. So that's an example. And then sometimes I think rapper beef too, when you have Drake might have a beef with somebody or different rappers. Sometimes I feel that those are, not all the time, but sometimes I feel that they're done just to create press, just to keep their names in the public. Yeah.
Sometimes you find when it comes to this sort of crisis management, I mean, people will almost take a step away from the limelight. Or back off to regroup before they bring out their messaging, or how they're going to strategize and move forward next. Sometimes you hear that, well, you got to face it head on and jump right into it and sort of like tackle it before it becomes something that it needs to, something bigger than it needs to be, right? So I mean, like, just from your perspective as a PR professional, what is typically your guidance in those scenarios? I mean, I know it's generalization because every situation is a little bit different and depends how deep, but what are your thoughts on sort of those types of strategies and what is usually correct?
Yeah, we call that getting ahead of the media.
Yeah.
So if we know that a story is going to break and there's something related inside, then we're usually talking to the media in advance. And we know that. So, and again, on a consumer brand and on a music side. So since we're talking a lot about music, I'll kind of explain that side. So if I wanted to get ahead of an album release, and say I'm working with Lady Gaga, and I have like Chromatica coming out, and I know it's going to be coming out in 2020, I'm already going to be talking to media way in advance and letting them know that there's something coming down the pipeline. So those are examples of, getting ahead of the story. A lot of the time with consumer brands, something will happen and people will try to get ahead of the story and talk to media so that they have it doesn't hit as hard. And that happens. And there's multiple reasons that could happen too, as well too. But it's one of those things. It's not easy, but we try to do it as much as we can when you have things that are issues like that, when you have crisis management and stuff like that. But a lot of the time, unfortunately, a lot of brands are reactive when it comes to crisis management. And that's something that I try not to have them do. When we work with them, I think one of the best PR people and what they're supposed to do is always think of the good and the bad situations. They should look at both drastic sides because you kind of know you're going to land in the middle, but you want to be able to understand both sides so that you can come at it in different ways. And then you know what media is going to ask you and you're prepared for it and you've prepared for your client. So anyone who's watching this and you have a brand or a company, a crisis communications plan is very important. You might not think it's something you should invest in, but it is something that you should. You can do it in your downtime with your communications comm team. It's very important, especially in a time like this right now. So, yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about what you just said to the time like this. This is obviously, you hear words like unprecedented, pivoting, like there's all these buzzwords that are so common during this time.
Right.
And I think you're in a perfect position where you're seeing both some of the good and some of the really bad impacts of what's happening right now. So just talk to us about some of the experiences that you've had with your clients through sort of COVID, even Black Lives Matter, because that's obviously a huge issue that both as a company, as an artist, you got to be on top of. So what sort of things are you seeing right now?
Yeah, cancel culture is real. It really is real, and it's something big right now. And it needs to. There is a reason why we're going through these moments of cancel culture. I'm not going to say if I agree with it or not because that doesn't really matter what my opinion is. I think it matters how clients decide to use it, but understanding what cancel culture is. So during first for things like COVID, we're having moments that for sure, people are stopping accounts or they're freaking out because they're not sure if their business is going to keep going. So you have to pivot and you have to have different strategies and you have to be able to be very, very flexible when you have a business in any form and ready to move quickly and make decisions. So that's one thing with COVID. When we're going through a Black Lives Matter movement, which is a civil rights movement, which needs to happen, and I will say that personally, these are things that sometimes it's okay. And this type of moment, it's okay for brands to step back and it's okay for people to step back to let that movement happen or let a civil rights movement happen. They're allowed to have their opinions. Sometimes they don't have to associate it with their brand if they don't want to. I don't feel that anyone needs to really be pushed to do that. But I feel that there shouldn't be any negativity towards the civil rights movement in any form like that. So there are times that you should stop, listen. For example, when all of the artists decide to do a blackout, and it really started with the music industry doing the Blackout Tuesday, but then everyone really collected around it as well too. That was something that the industry did because we need to be quiet so these people's voices can be heard. And I think that's very important. And then we move into cancel culture. And cancel culture is happening for a reason right now, and it is part of call out. It doesn't mean if it's right or wrong, but there's a reason why it's happening because we are changing as a society and we're evolving. So now it's the time that, maybe as we hopefully progress as a society, we're not going to be using cancel culture as much. We're not going to be canceling people out right, left, and center. Maybe it won't be so sensitive. But here's hoping. But right now there's a reason for it. And sometimes we have to listen to it. And as individuals, we have to make decisions if we want to cancel that person out, yes or no. And I think you have to be objective as a watcher in the news or anything that you do. Just because someone says that they're being canceled doesn't mean they should be. Some people in conversation should be like Harvey Weinstein and Epstein. Those people should be canceled. Right. But there's other things that, people do make mistakes. And I think there should be room for forgiveness in context of, maybe saying something that was not appropriate, let's say in some form and not realizing it or being misquoted. I think that those times people need to have a little more leniency to understand who the brand is or who the person is and what their mission and values are. So, yeah. It's a long form of saying that.
And I think,
no, you're right.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And I think, one of the key elements here is that brands and people are going to make mistakes during this time because
100%.
change is not easy. Like, as a society, we've been so stuck. And I mean, I don't know if the word stuck is the right word exactly, but that's the first thing that comes to mind. Like, we've been so stuck and stagnant in certain ways of doing things and approaching things and going towards things that when COVID happened and when the Black Lives Movement happened, and as things are rapidly changing from all different directions, we have to change along with it. But we don't always know better either. So I love the fact that you hit on that, like, we sometimes do need to not cancel people out, and we need to forgive, and we need to understand that we're all figuring this out together and trying to move forward and adapt and change as a society. That's very different to do when we're all in different places during this time as well.
Yeah, I agree. So, people make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes every single day. And so brands do too, and small businesses do. So, I think larger brands should be held accountable for certain things. And same with, people like Harvey Weinstein and Epstein and things like that. Those are very different conversations out of cancel culture. But we look at the smaller form of people getting canceled that are businesses or, maybe being miscommunicated or misunderstood. I think those are things that we have to start looking at as we grow. Cancel culture is here to stay, and it's very important because it helps progression of other movements, and it helps to protect people that are innocent or people that have gone through horrible situations. And it's there for a reason, because it's hopefully making our industries better in entertainment and any form of business. Here's hoping. But we have to remember that we can't be extreme and go on the other side and start canceling out the little restaurant that lives down the street because they made a mistake. I think you have to have a little bit of forgiveness and understanding around that as well too. And I hope that's the way cancel culture grows, to be honest. But we'll see. We'll see.
You talked about, we're talking about cancel culture, and we're talking about, sort of the importance of messaging. Yes, there's a proponent, as we have just all agreed on, that you got to have the compassion if someone does mess up, because we're all human and we're going to make mistakes, intentional, and a lot of times it's unintentional, especially in unintentional scenarios, and especially when they've owned up to it. But with that being said, there's also the importance of making sure that your brand messaging is important, so that if a situation like that comes up, you know how to react to it and strategize to go back to saying, hey, this is our brand messaging. This was an error, an oversight, or whatever the case. So with that being said, for a company or a person or an individual is building a brand and says, well, I can manage my own PR because it's pretty straightforward stuff. If I make a mistake, I can apologize, whatever the case. How important is it from your perspective to have a PR firm or agency on side or on board with you from a communication standpoint, not just during crisis management, but during regular branding and messaging times? That was a long-winded way to ask a question.
No, it's a great question. No, for sure. So I always say to brands when they're starting out, you can do your own PR. You can try. If you're working with like the local paper, for example, so say you're a restaurant or a small business, you don't need to hire me to go to the Mississauga paper, or you can do that. You can build those relationships because it's a great starting to understand what media wants. So you can go to your neighbor influencers. You can do those things. And I implore them to go look things up and understand that community, because that's the real basic fundamentals of marketing within PR and, say, an influencer campaign. But as your brand starts to grow and you're doing lots of other things besides doing your own PR, you're not going to be able to handle it. And at the same time, you need to outsource, right? That's how you grow. You have to give jobs to other people so that you can grow your business, especially in the marketing side, and bringing experts in that can come in and talk about, here are the best things to do to make your brand grow a little bit larger. And so, over time, it's very important that you have that, because key messaging and having, a strategy around it is really important. I don't think people sometimes from small and large really understand the importance of a strategy. Tactics are wonderful, but strategy is really what you want and what you want to be able to follow. And then understanding who your audience is, that's really important. And then how do you talk to them? And then how is media talking to them for you? So a lot of the time people think that PR is just marketing and we're just talking to the consumer. Well, we are, but I'm really talking to the media member that's talking to the consumer for me. And that's really important. So I have to make sure that my message is really clear when I'm talking to them, so that they're clear when they're talking to my audience, because they're the expert. You know, if somebody's reading the Toronto Star or the Globe and Mail, you know, or the New York Times, I want to make sure that writer knows exactly what I'm thinking and knows exactly what my message is and knows what the company I'm working for, the artist is, or what they represent, so that when I don't get misquoted when they decide to do an article, or my client does. And that's really important, especially when you start going to larger and larger and larger media, like, you know, BNM, Bloomberg, and things like that. You start getting millions of people watching it, you know, or even, you know, hundreds of thousands of people watching it still. It's really important that your message is clear. So even when you're small, you can still try it yourself, and it's really important to learn. But then as you grow, it's really great to be able to give it to other PR practitioners or other marketers to be able to help you grow the message properly.
So when would you say that a brand is small enough for them to do it themselves, and when should they start looking for, let's say, you to, you know, help them grow and get to where their ideal goal is with their brand?
That's a great question too.
That's also a tough question.
It is, yeah. Well, everyone's different, right? Like, no, but it's a really great question, because how do you value? How do you measure that, right? So everyone's different. So you can have a little beauty brand, but say you're really busy doing sales and you know that you're the sales guru in the business. Well, go do sales. That's what you're really good at. You know, you can try and put your hand in PR and try that. But if you know that that's not where your time is going to be value enough, and you have the budget to be able to bring on a PR person, and it's needed and it's important to you and it's something of value to you for the business, and it's part of your strategy to grow the business out, then bring somebody in. And there's like, all of us range at different costs as well too. You know, PR people can be affordable if you're looking for the right PR people and you're looking for the right things and you know what you want and you're clear with them. You can find the right publicist or PR agency to work with you. It doesn't mean you have to be, you know, this massive agency that you need to go to. We're all different shops and sizes. There's people that work by themselves. There's people that have, you know, a boutique that have like, you know, 1 to 5 employees. And then there's people that have 5 to 10. And then there's agencies that have, you know, 10 to 100. And then you can go upwards, right? So never be scared to talk to agencies and see and put feelers out there, because you might find someone that will work in a budget that you'd be surprised that, and then will do a good job. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Do you want to continue? No, I was just saying that I feel like that's one of the things, you know, a lot of smaller brands, like I've had conversations with so many, and one of their biggest fears, well, if I go to a PR agencies and it costs me an arm and a leg and I don't have that budget, well, and I'm always like, I think somehow, somewhere you need to start, especially when you become in that transition phase where, you know, like you said, you can't do it all, and you're supposed to, you know, maybe like 1 or 2 key skills to grow your business, your brand. But you do need that outside to come in. It's, you know, I think and you really hit on it, that cost is a factor that people freak out on when they think, you know, PR and everything. But I guess there are different ways to like go about it.
Yeah, and you have to be flexible, right? And you have to be realistic. So that's a big thing. You should find a PR person that will say, you know, if you're going to work within a budget range, then everybody needs to be on board of what that looks like and what is realistic for this outcome around this budget. That's what's important, right? And that becomes into the PR practitioner and the marketer that is saying, this is what I can do within this budget. And then it's also the company that has to agree to it as well too. So if you're both really clear on where things are going, then you won't have a problem. I think that's a lot of the times that marketing agencies and just agencies in general get into sticky situations. If a budget isn't really clear and their strategy and their tactics and where they're going isn't clear enough, that's when you can run into problems. So if you start that in the beginning and then everybody has the roadmap of where they're going, then you should be fine. Yeah.
What would you say sets you apart in terms of you being Vocab Communications, like a company, sets you apart from some of the PR agencies within the city? And I know you mentioned your saying things like, you know, you can have just from an employee size perspective, or the type of work that you do, the scope of work that you do in terms of budgets. But what sets you guys apart from some of the agencies?
Yeah, we're one of the only agencies, there are other ones that do it, but we're really one of the only ones that do a lot of lifestyle and entertainment. So we do a mix of it. We do a lot of a blend. And we also do business as well, too. So I've worked with Alterna Bank. I've worked with Mortgages of Canada. On that side, I do a lot of the business PR myself. My team doesn't do it all the time because I have more experience in it.
Right.
So we have a little bit of a wider net of things that we work on. And so we're always learning and growing in that aspect as well, too. But as I see, agencies, we're all different sizes. A lot of agencies, too, in Canada don't always work in the States or within, let's say, the UK. So within the entertainment sector of the business, we've been able to go, music's been really wonderful for us. So it's been able to bridge us into the UK and into the States and in Canada. So that does set us aside differently than other agencies that only work nationally in Canada. So we do that as well, but we also work in other places within the entertainment sector. So that makes us really different, and it's also really fun. When I started Vocab 11 years, somebody asked me in an interview, they're like, where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? And I said, I want to be working in the States and I want to be working in other countries. And now after 11 years, I'm doing it. So I'm happy that we're doing it. And it's a new challenge all the time. So, yeah.
How did that come about for you guys to get the opportunity to work with clients in the States and the UK and that sort of thing?
Through other clients, through other experience. The nice thing is sometimes when you're working with larger clients that have a lot of notoriety, you get to work with media. It's not that it's always easier. It's still a lot of work, but it's able to have access to other media to have larger conversations with them and build relationships. So when you're doing that and you're working with a celebrity or you're working with someone that has a lot of notoriety, then you're able to then talk to other media members about up and coming artists. So those relationships you can bridge for other people. And that's where it started for us. When I started doing a lot of music tours around Canada, and like music festivals, I started working with a lot of international press around it as well too. And that became a little bit of an open door for me to start going down that way. And also then going there. Like now I go to California a lot when I'm going to work. We have a podcast as well too that we do on the side with a friend.
Yes.
So I'm down there as well too. We have, if I can plug it, it's all pop repeat.
We're gonna get into that because I wanted to hear about your podcast too.
And so plug it right there. And so I'll go to California and Marie will come with me, and then I'll do a mix of PR work and then I'll do a mix of podcast work. But all of it feeds into one. And that's something that I really love because I love to travel and I love working with other people in different countries and doing other work with them in business. For example, in the UK, media members are amazing. They love to have long form conversations. What in Canadian and American, it's very quick. We like to get things done. We like to, get things moving. In the UK, their conversations are like, well, how was the weather today? And you're literally having long form email conversations, but it's lovely because, and then you get on the phone with them and you really start to create this other personal relationship with them outside of almost being a person, outside of the job as being a person as well too. So it's a different way of doing business, but it's fun. And if you're willing and flexible to learn those things and be open to it as well and doing different styles outside of your own, then you create a really great net of new media members that you get to know. So, yeah. I
was going to say it's probably a lot of building those relationships, and that's probably a key to being able to work with clients outside of Canada.
Yeah.
Just the proximity is difficult because if you're not out there and you're not meeting people out in that environment, how can you really represent a client? But as you said, you've had that opportunity through some of the work you've done, and that's helped you to build outside, which is great.
It is, and I'd rather meet them in person. Like I'm the type of person I'll get on a plane and go meet you because I want to meet you. I want that relationship. I want to know who you are. I'm interested in that. And so I like to cultivate relationships. I've always have since I've been younger. So that's to me, some people, and you don't need to do that. You can have an email relationship, but for me, it's something that I want to do and I enjoy doing it. So we'll keep doing it. And then from there, hopefully that will grow. And when you have that relationship, sometimes those media relationships do turn into friendships, which are really great. Yeah. So there's all different levels. The PR agency or the business is so funny because it really is part of your lifestyle, but it also it's business as well too, right? It bleeds a lot. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, so, you gotta love that.
We're gonna take a quick break right there, and we'll be right back.
Okay, that sounds good.
And we are back with Chrissy, and she owns her PR and and media firm, Vocab. And Chrissy, we were just talking about this, during the break, is that you also do media coaching. And I don't think I've really heard of any PR person that at least I've researched or known that also does media coaching. So it's very interesting to hear that you do that. And what does that entail? Like, what does media coaching entail?
Yeah, it's a mix of talking to clients about the way that they present themselves forward facing to media. So it could be the way that they're, perceived on camera, when they're doing an interview, what clothes that they should think about wearing, if they're even doing their makeup, what they should consider, along with then, when they're talking, for example, like I was saying this before, you want to keep your hands down. You don't want to keep them high in your face. So there's different things like that, along with then, when you're talking and doing print interviews, what are expected to happen. If you're doing a radio interview, like a tip here is when anyone's ever doing a radio interview, you're supposed to smile on the other end. And even though they can't see you, but it actually supposed to heighten your feelings and your emotions and get you a little bit more excited. And it's true. I've done it before. When I was doing an interview on the radio, I was like, I have to take my own advice. And it works. It really does work. So stuff like that. We're teaching them little tips and tricks on things to do to make their interviews better, how to listen, how to be more compelling. If they're an expert, what tips and things and advice they can use when it comes to statistics and stuff like that. What makes them a better media expert so that the media would want them back and make them credible. So that can run from all different things, from businesses and artists as well too. And then we get into things like bridging and cherry picking, which are tactics that we use when media asks hard questions, and then how do we get out of them. So that's really driven towards CEOs and things like that as well too. So there's reasons for everyone should be media coached every single day, every single time that a business opens. They should, at least one time, if they're going to try and go in front of the media, they should work with a publicist and they should be media coached. It's really important. Everyone thinks that they're amazing when they do interviews, but we're not. It takes practice and it takes time, and it takes doing it consistently to know that you're going to get better and better and better. Everybody screws up. It's just natural. It's not easy. It looks easy, but it's not. If it was, then we'd be doing it every day.
The professionals make it look easy. That's why I think a lot of people think that they can get in front of a camera and do it too.
Right, exactly. It's not.
We're not gonna ask you too many secrets about your topics here, just because we want people to call you, because if they need that service, they should talk to you one-on-one.
Right. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
But thank you for sharing that with us. I wanted to talk a little bit about your podcast, because you have a podcast as well, to an award-winning podcast, from my understanding, that is also sort of related to the business that you're in. So I would like you to speak to that a little bit and share with us what you do there and what sort of things you touch on in your podcast.
Yeah, for sure. Our podcast is called Alt Pop Repeat. So we talk about how counterculture and alternative cultures sync. We use the word sync, which is another word, connect, or the intersections between pop culture. So we talk about those catalyst moments that counterculture has. And counterculture are things like, the civil rights movement, cannabis is a counterculture,
yes.
LGBTQ plus movement is a counterculture, drag is a counterculture. So these are all these things that a lot of people don't realize that they started as counterculture, which counterculture means it's rebelling against the mainstream norm. But then as we see over time, things that start to become part of the mainstream. So cannabis is one of them. So we have a show that's coming out talking about cannabis, and we use experts in the space along with their celebrities, or they could be influencers, or they could be, it could be writers. They're people that really know that space well. And so they talk us through their experiences through that counterculture movement. And then in the end of the show, Marie and I do a thing that we called a sync. And we sync it up, and then we talk about those catalyst moments that have happened throughout the years that made it turn into mainstream pop culture. So it's a fun little show.
Of course. Sounds exciting.
Yeah, we've gotten some great guests. We've had George Strombo on it. We've had Trinity the Tuck Taylor, that's won Drag Race. We have tons. There's been so many. Oh my gosh, Jeremy Kenyon Locker Corbell, who's been on Joe Rogan, Dave Foley. So we've been really fortunate to have some really great guests that have guided us through these stories. And on the other side, it works with us in PR because I get in front of a lot of great people. Again, building another relationship. And then they get to see the other side of us as well, too. They get the other side of me and who I am as a person. And I really love the topic. That's what I watch when I go home. It's authentically, It's authentically me and it's authentically Marie. So there's this other side of having a friendship and understanding who we are. And then also, a lot of the times they're like, hey, I need a publicist. Chrissy, you're a PR person too. We trust you. We like you. We understand the work that you do. So sometimes referrals come out of that as well too. When it comes to guests or even people just listening to the show and finding us through Instagram or through like Spotify and iTunes and coming to, or YouTube and saying like, hey, I need a publicist. I didn't know you did this as well too. So it really is, it kind of feeds each other, which is really great. So it never started as that. It started as a love for podcasting. But then you find out that it starts to feed business as well too, which is great.
Well, I was just going to ask how it came about, like, and how you and Marie got together to do this idea.
So I've known Marie for years. So Marie was the first digital, she had the first digital talk show. That was a live streaming talk show in Canada. It might've been all of North America, to be honest.
Nice.
I think this was like 7 or 8 years ago. So I knew her co-host, and then I didn't know Marie as well. And then over about like a couple years, we saw each other, but I would see Nat a lot more. And then one day Marie and I were online on Facebook, and we decided I was like, hey, let's go for a drink. And she was like, yeah. And we were both going through similar stuff in our lives at the moment, at that time. And then I called her and was like, hey, do you want to do a podcast? Because it's been like circulating in my head for like the longest time. And she said, yeah, let's talk about it. So she came over, and then we fell into this concept because over like having cocktails, we realized like we like the same stuff. Like we like astrology. We like things about cannabis. I love ufology. Like there's all these topics that we both were just diving into. And then we both love pop culture. We both work in the pop culture lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of came across this term or these syncs that we ended up calling it. And then it ended up turning into a podcast, but it keeps growing and growing and growing. And then one of our first episodes, she sent a note to myself, and at this time Mike was helping co-produce us. Andre is one of our producers now.
Nice.
But she sent us a note. She said to all of us on an email, she's like, you want to go to California? And we're like, yeah, let's go. So we just like all three of us got on a plane and like went to go see George Strombolopoulos, and interviewed him along with Jeremy Corbell, who I met years ago at like this convention. And he has a number one number one doc on Netflix, Area 50, Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers. So Jerry and I became friends in that, and it really just started. So when you find somebody who loves to travel and is literally like your soul sister, like you start a podcast. Like it's just that's what happened. And now we have fun. Like we travel together. We were recording last night together. Like it's naturally who we are. Even though we talk a lot on the show, we just talk a lot together. In person, yeah. It just what you hear on the show is authentically us. So
sound familiar, Rashi?
Yeah.
Our story's not that different.
Yes, it does.
Really? What's your story?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear that.
So
how did you guys meet? Yeah.
So actually, very almost very similar in terms of we met through a common friend. We connected to Rashi hosts. No, she does a bunch of industry fashion show events, and she operates them. She provides sort of the service and the background for them, and some of them she's sort of the forefront, the person who's actually running it. She's also a stylist, and she's also very well connected in that industry. So I learned about Rashi and sort of the work that she does, and one of my buddies was involved in a show with her, and I said, hey, give me an introduction. I would love to host some of her shows, because it's the kind of stuff I love doing. I love fashion, and I love hosting, and I was trying to find ways to bring those worlds together. So Rashi and I connected, and similarly, like if you read our Instagram profile, it all started with a bottle of wine. We went out to talk business about me potentially hosting some of her shows, and while we're at it, and I was like, you know what, this might be the perfect person, because we're working on a TV show concept, and she might be the perfect person to work with on this. And so I pitched her the idea, and she's like, I love this. And she's like, why don't we, as we're building that and sort of working through building the TV show, run a podcast where we do some of our meetings live, with some of the people we'd be talking to anyways, as we're building the show. And it's sort of in the fashion world and the lifestyle and in business spaces. And this just took on a whole life of its own and started and we ran with this. And now we're here a year and a half later running a weekly podcast.
Wow.
And
wow.
Yeah. And then, and when he was telling me about the whole like styling and TV show and men's fashion, because that's what he's good at and that's what he loves to do. Like that's what he's very, very good at. And I know that. I was just like, yeah, like, I'm sure. I mean, I'm down to help you. That was my words. I'm down to help you. If you need introductions, I will do that. Not an issue at all. You're like doing some of my shows, no problem. That in my mind, I was leaving that conversation with, sure, if this guy needs help, no, like it's not a big deal, right? We're all friends here. The next day, I don't know how, maybe it was all that wine that we were just drinking and chatting. Let's do our TV show together. I was like, I know nothing about this world, but okay. And then, like you said, we're now here hosting weekly podcasts and building our style series and finalizing our show concept.
That's amazing. But that's the best part, though, when you meet someone you can create with. And I think that, if you can do it as long as you possibly can and it makes you happy, do it. Like that, I think it's really important. I think creating and for people to create on all different levels is really magical and wonderful in many different ways. Like I think it feeds the soul in so many ways. I know it does for me.
It does.
When I started the podcast with Marie, it was one of the best things I probably ever decided to do because I got to create again. Like I created Vocab, but I've had it for 11 years and I love it and I'm still developing and creating in that space. But this was something else that was a new challenge and it was a new direction. And it just, I woke up every day and I was just like, oh, life just got a little bit better because I started doing, it's like a form of art, right? It's self-expression. It is great. And I find that everyone should have that outlet. If it's podcasting, if it's drawing, if it's dancing, if it's skipping, like if it makes you happy, just do it. Yeah.
And it's a great way to meet people, as you mentioned to me.
It really is. Yeah.
Whether you get business out of it or not, but just like some of the stories we've heard on our shows and the conversations we've had and the experiences that we've been able to hear from other people and what they've dealt with and how they built their businesses or how they work through sort of their design process with their boutique shop or, how they manage through their businesses, whether it's through COVID or just in general and how they work with their clients, like some really amazing stories with a lot of local and national/international heroes that we like to call them,
Yeah. A friend said to me, someone could be, for example, like a Stevie Wonder, and everybody looks up to Stevie Wonder. He's an amazing artist. But why can't your friend be Stevie Wonder?
Exactly.
Right? So I think that we don't give
Does that sound familiar?
I don't think we give our friends and people we know that work in the business enough credit is because we know them and we just take that for granted sometimes because we're just like, oh, they're good at what they do. But then you might not realize they might be amazing at what they do compared to some other people. And they all different levels, and sometimes those people that are doing really great things don't get the spotlight or don't get to have those conversations, but they really should. Sometimes they should have them more than the celebrity or the person that's really notable because they're the ones that are building the back end of that machine for somebody else. So I think what you guys are doing is great. Like everyone's got a story no matter what you're doing.
Exactly.
So,
exactly. Yeah. And there's always an odd, and then, sorry, Rashi, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and to your point, Chrissy, I will just say this one sentence again. Does this story sound familiar?
Yeah, quite a bit. Quite a bit. A lot of it. But I think that's just what it is. And I work with Chrissy, as I mentioned earlier, in a different capacity where I get to work with some of her artists on my other radio show, and I love it because it's a lot of it. Some of them are budding, some of them in the business for a while, but some of them such amazing eclectic sounds and such a unique story. But for example, the one Black Denim I spoke with, and such a unique story about how they came together. Their music is so cool.
It's so good.
So cool. Like I listened to that before I sat down with them, and I went through the interview with them, and I listened to their album because I want to get to know you, especially with an artist, you get to learn a lot about them through their art form, whether it's art or if they're a chef or they're in the music world or if they're a designer. If you take a look to and listen to what they do, you learn a lot about them. So I just love, like, every record was unique, it was different, had these funk elements, had these hip hop elements, had these rock elements, like so many different cool things. And you're like, it's supposed to be, this is like, you think of a hip hop band, it's supposed to be this one typical band, and you listen to these guys, and then when I sat down with them, that energy from that album comes right out into talking with them.
It does.
It's so cool because all those different elements, you see them in the different members of the group. as you're
Yeah,
talking.
there's 8 of them. There's
Yes.
8 members in the band.
Yeah.
And, you know, when they started working with DMC for Run DMC
Yeah.
on the Shark single, it was like doing press with DMC is one thing because he's a hip hop legend and I personally love him. So even for me, it was just like, wow, like that's a moment for myself. But even for them and him repping them and saying that, you know, comparing them to other bands and saying that this is one of the best things that has ever come out of hip hop recently. Like that's huge.
Yeah.
When you have an icon in hip hop, you know, especially with that moved hip hop into rock as well too, right?
Yeah.
And it's so iconic for that. It changes the game, and you've got this band that's been working so hard over the years out of Ottawa now that's getting all this getting all of these mentions and all of this press, which is rightfully so for them. As much as I can put somebody in front of the press, it really depends on the sound and the story as well too. So it takes part of that. It just takes me to pull that out and get those moments and to present it the right way. But they've just got something that's so beautiful. When I first heard them too, I was like, I love you guys. Like I love that old school like hip hop sound, and they have it. Kenny can write with his eyes closed. Like he's
incredible.
Unbelievable. So those are things that I see what makes me happy. Like I've been telling them, like you need to go apply for a Juno. Like you need to go. This is like, please, if you guys don't, I'll be upset. Because they have that ability. And when I see that, it makes me happy because then I can help open up other doors for them too, right? They're opening up doors for me for introducing me to DMC, and I can open up a door for them for a manager or a label or whatever else it might be as well too. So you get that like give and take relationship, and then you just respect each other, and everybody just starts creating great stuff. And that's the best out of it. Like I really, really love them. Like they're such a great band. So if you haven't, go check them out, people. Black Denim.
Yeah, they're it's Black Denim, all one word, no C. There's a chant to it.
Yeah, BLAKDENIM.
Yeah. I made them do the chant on our interview, and then Kenny also freestyled a little bit. So again, really,
nice.
Yeah, really fun, really great bunch of people, and like just like 'cause the music's awesome. That's like an album like I'd put on like on a Friday night if I'm just chilling at home and I just want to like hang out and I'm doing some stuff. And I want to have music playing that I want to listen to because again, it's different and it's refreshing and it gives you a new element. Again, I can talk about them for a while because I really do like them, but
well, it's funny because I was listening to them and I was sharing what I was listening on my Instagram. I usually do that because I like letting people know what I listen to, just because I am part of a music publicist, right? It's part of what we do.
Right.
So they know my diversity of music as well. And so I was sharing one of their older tracks and he's like, Chrissy, you're not sharing Sharks. I'm like, I know, Kenny. I'm like, I'm listening to all your other music. And he just started laughing and I was like, because it's all good. I'm like, and he's like, awesome. Well, okay, I got it now. I'm like, don't worry. I've been sharing Sharks like crazy. I'm like, I'm just sharing all your other stuff because I love it, you know? And I think that's what music publishers should do. You should really love, or any form of anything that you work on, you should love your client. Like you should love the product. You should love the brand. You should love the sound. Like that means a lot. When you do, then people see that, and then they are attracted to that as well. So, yeah.
And that relationship, like you said, it goes both ways when you're working. I mean, from your perspective as a publicist with your clients. I mean, for us, and I'm sure even with your podcast, like I mean, a lot of the folks that we started with and now also work with in terms of having as guests, they're people that we have relationships and have worked with on numerous different, whether it's events or, you know, Rashi's pulled clothes from them for a fashion show, whatever the case. But because they're so good at what they do, it's like you want to feature them. And then as you're talking, like you learn so many new things about them when you're having these kind of conversations because you're getting a little more in depth sometimes, right? And sometimes people like they really get to open up and you get to learn, and that builds that relationship a little bit deeper too.
Yeah, it does. It does. And like a friendship evolves. Like this is one of these businesses when you work in media and PR that friendships can come out of it. You know, when we are media coaching, I have to tell my clients, you know, you have to sometimes be wary because media are not always your friends.
Yeah.
And there's no such thing as, you know, when people say there's off the record, there's no such thing as that. Everything's on the record. So, you know, you do have to understand where a relationship, you know, starts and begins with media, and they know it as well too, because that's media ethics as well. Everyone has to have has to play in a safe space when it comes to that. But overall, I tell media the reason why I want them to get to know, I tell my artists or people that I work with, I want them to get to know media and I want them to have that relationship like I do. Because if they're walking out and going like, for example, Rashi, to one of your shows, they're going to know who you are and they're going to be like, hey, how you doing? And I want them to have that dialogue and that conversation. It's more welcoming and creates a great atmosphere for you, creates a great atmosphere for them. And, and they feel wanted. I think that's a big part of it too. Walking into a fashion show or walking into anything like that is scary, especially when you just start out in the business. You don't know what people are going to say. You don't know how people are going to react. So the more friends and companions and people that are championing in your corner, it's going to be a lot easier walking into a room. And then that relationship grows and grows and grows. So that's why I tell them too, because most people are generally friendly, but it is scary at times. So
Absolutely.
And this is an industry where it's very easy to feel and get lonely, and that's because of the type of work that you do. Is like whether it's music or fashion, and even both, because those worlds do come together. Prior to COVID, like you're doing events and then you're doing styling, or then if you're trying to get into the music world and style them and stuff, you don't end up having much downtime, personal time, or social life, or like personal social life, because for you, going to events is work. For you, trying to set up those meetings with a PR of a band or an artist to say, hey, I'm a stylist, this is what I want to do for you guys, right? Takes up your time, and then actually working it. And I've noticed, and I remember having this conversation with someone, being a stylist or being in this industry can be very, very lonely. So to your point, the more friends you end up making, especially with people who you work, or you can know who's obviously with media, you always keep that line, but as you make friends in the industry, where you, like you said, you can walk into a room and you're like, okay, I feel comfortable enough to know there will be people that I know, or I've just had dinner with them, so I have a vibe that I don't feel alienated over here. I think that makes a big difference, because this is your life down the road, for the next 10, 20 years, hopefully, as you keep growing, this is going to be your world, right?
Well, that's how you invest in it. And I think the other part too is that people that are doing the same things, they're like-minded, and they understand, because they're going through the same moments. They're going through the same things. They're going through the same struggles, or have been through the same struggles, so they can relate. And there is that understanding that's really great. I think that's why media people and PR people, and generally in the industry too, in entertainment, why everyone gets along so well, because we can relate on the struggles. Marketing, other marketers, the same thing as well too, even in advertising. I think that's probably why a lot of people marry each other in the business. They can relate to what, if a client has a need and what that is, and making sure you're servicing the client properly, and then along with them, same with your artist, and and then what media wants. And so you really understand them on a different level. There's a personal level, but then there's also this work level, because it's not an easy industry. It really isn't. There's ups and downs all the time. Everything people say to me, they're like, oh, you just must go to events all the time and you work with media. Like, how fabulous is that? And I'm like, yeah, that's the perk. I said, everyone has a perk in their job. Some people get 50% off. Sometimes people get flown out to amazing tropical islands to go check out resorts. I don't get that. I'm like, mine is I get to go to fabulous events. I get to hang out with cool people. That's my perk in the job. But I work hard every single day to give myself that opportunity to have that perk and to have that lifestyle, because that's the lifestyle that I enjoy and that I like. And everyone who works towards that is 100% entitled to it, I believe. So exactly.
And like you said, your personal life ends up becoming part of your professional life. So that's why, I guess, like you said, people end up with each other within the same industry, because it's just easy. Sometimes, right? Because most of your 9-to-5s are not gonna get it. They won't get while your meetings at 8 p.m. and then while you have 3 events to go to that same night, and why your client wants you to still be with them at midnight, and all you want to do is go home and go to bed. It's a very different world for those who are not in it, though.
In entertainment and lifestyle, in the fashion world, it's really known to do that, right? And then you get other industries that you don't always have to. If you're working with the government and doing corporate comm, or even if you're working with agencies, sometimes PR people don't want to go out at night all the time. I know I don't all the time, but I go out to things that I know that I should, and I also go out to things that I enjoy. And as I grow in the industry, I used to go out to everything in my 20s. And now, as I'm saying my age now, but as I'm in my 30s, then I start to understand, those are things that I should go to and shouldn't go to, and where to flex my time and my abilities in that kind of conversation. But overall, I think that you don't have to do it all the time. I think people feel like they need to, but it just depends on what industry you're in. And if you like it, go and do it. If you don't, then you don't really need to as much.
Yeah.
You know, I think everyone has their own levels there. You know, I don't go out every night. If I did, I would be exhausted. I wouldn't be able to work. It would be impossible. And I don't want to do that every night.
Yeah.
I want to, you know, and obviously now we can't with COVID. So we have different ways of networking now where it's like Zooms or, you know,
Yes.
or even just through Instagram. Like I've met so many people through Instagram and through social like networking like crazy since COVID, but everybody's doing that. But that's the way that we do it. And it's great. And people that don't want to go out to events, that's another way to do it as well. Right. There's always opportunities. You just kind of never say no, just find that little loophole and find that way.
And your niche. And your niche. You got to find your niche.
And your
Totally.
niche.
Yeah, totally.
So Chrissy, tell us what's next for you, for your podcast, and for Vocab.
Yeah, so we have a new episode coming out. It's coming out on Monday. I can't say who it is yet because we haven't announced it. But we have new episodes that are coming out. We have some distribution that's going to be picked up on the podcast as well too that we're going to be announcing soon. So Marie and I are really excited about that. And then for Vocab, it's just work too that we're doing some feature films right now, which are really great. Some documentaries, and then working on a lot of music right now, and then some consumer brand stuff too as well. So it's always kind of growing, and every day is different. Like it was funny. I talked to Marie earlier today, and I just said, you know, I was like, I've worked on the craziest things today. I was like, today I worked on like a documentary, then I was working on something with like a large distribution channel. I'm like, what is my life sometimes? It's just wild, but I like it and I love it. But you know, it's always different every day. So yeah,
it sounds really exciting. It sounds like every day is not the same, which is always nice.
No, some days it's not. Some days are just like I've laughed, or sometimes the girls I've taken one day we're at Alterna Bank, you know, doing something with banking, and the next day we're at a juicing company where we're working with the juicing, and they're showing us the juicing factory, and I'm like, what are we doing? Like this is, you know, so that's the days. Like they're always ever changing, but that's what keeps it fun and exciting. So
super exciting. So where can people find you guys online? Your socials, your websites. Where do we get you guys online? And we'll drop it in the description, but.
Awesome. Thanks. So the company is at Vocab.com on Instagram and Twitter and everywhere else, or you can go to vocabcommunications.com. If you want to find myself, I'm at Miss Vocab, MISSVOCAB. And if you want to check out the podcast, it's Alt Pop Repeat, and that's all one word. Or you can go to altpoprepeat.com too.
Yeah, we'll drop all the descriptions in the the socials in the description there. But do thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Chrissy. This is awesome. It's been such a fun conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, like we said earlier, you know, you always learn something from a conversation. So thank you for teaching us some things and also sharing your experiences and your stories with us.
Thank you. You too. And I learned how you guys ended up doing it too. So it's good.
That's awesome. And so for our listeners, thank you again for listening, and we will catch you next week on Elevated Grapes. Hey guys, thank you for watching that podcast or that video. If you like what you hear and you want to hear more of us and see some of our behind the scenes stuff, subscribe below.
Yes, hit that little red button thingy that's over there and hit subscribe and keep following us for a lot more cool fun stuff.
Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you soon.